Well, that was exciting, wasn't it? Morning, everybody. Thank you very much. It's so good to see everybody here, see so many old friends, see some new faces. Thanks to the tech guys for plugging stuff in and then plugging it back in again. But we're working now, so it's good, so let's crack on. So I'm Matthew Morris. I'm Salesforce Innovation Director at Capgemini here in the UK. And I'm going to talk to you about diagramming Salesforce solutions, bringing the story to life. Thank you to my colleague Lee for the clicker. Okay, so how do we get here? So back in 2017, I was getting more and more into architecture. As is always the case with me, I was in the wrong job for trying to do what I was trying to do and trying to learn how to be an architect. I was working at the wrong sort of firm. But I worked through it, and I devised a way to help me very quickly extract requirements from documents, put them into diagrams, and then I had an opportunity with a friend of mine to do a video on Pluralsight. So I did that video back in 2017. It seems an awful long time ago now. The wonderful thing is people still come up to me and say, oh, I saw your video, so I guess it's still valuable. Then in 2019, we did some live solutioning on Ladies Be Architects. It's on their YouTube as well. I've got links at the end for all of these if you want it. And then London's Calling last year, I dusted off the presentation and refreshed it a little bit, added some new stuff in, and still got good response. So I thought, okay, what else can we do with this? What else have I learned in the few years since I first produced the video? And that's really what I'm going to show you today. I'm not going to tell you this is what you should do. I'm going to tell you this is what I do, show you some examples around more about telling the story. How can you use the diagrams to tell the story? So previously, you can go watch the Pluralsight video. You can go watch the London's Calling presentation from last year on YouTube. These are the things we did. So extract the requirements, produce a bunch of diagrams, and basically use those to communicate with different groups of stakeholders. But I didn't go into what you would say to those people. So this is really about bringing the story to life. So what can we do if we've got a diagram, if we've got a picture? How do we adapt that to fit the audience that we're going to be talking to? Because whether you're an architect by name or you're an architect, by role, it's what you're doing. You're taking responsibility for, the integrity of the system, delivering a solution that works end to end. You're going to talk to a lot of different people. So you need to talk to them about, what could happen and when it might happen. You might need to talk about what's the overall strategy. So we're in here doing a project, but actually, let's plan for the next 3 years. Let's look further out. How would you do that? And then I think it's been very important to me to get to know myself, which as somebody in their late 40s, it's kind of strange that I would say that. But the more you come to know what personality you are and be able to recognize personality traits in other people, it really helps to be able to tune into people and adapt your message so that it resonates with them. And this really is a secret, right? So when you're tailoring stuff, they only need to know what they need to know. And that's the trick. That's the X factor. If you can work that out, you'll get a lot more mileage. They don't need to know everything you know. And I've seen so many people, so many bright architects and developers absolutely crash and burn by just doing a download on some poor executive stakeholder who tunes out after about 30 seconds. It's amazing knowledge that the person's got, but it's the wrong audience. So, who are the people in those audiences? So, we have our technical stakeholders. And this is my nod to the future of the world. These are all AI-generated images, because it's much easier than trying to find an image. Just get to generate one. So with your technical audience, where are you going to meet them? So it might be in some formal setting like an architecture review board or a technical design authority. This is the place where they're going to want the technical details. But you need to think about, it's not your opportunity as a developer or as an architect or whatever your role to show them how clever you are. You're not there to do that. You're there to answer their questions, hopefully before they ask them. If you've prepared correctly, you should just be going through a box-ticking exercises. So they're interested really in protecting the platform, protecting the integrity. You might have created the most excellent whiz-bang architecture, but if it's all custom fields and it's all custom integrations, that's going to be a lot of technical debt for the future. So they want to avoid that. They want to know that you're following the rules. In any organization of any size, there'll be guardrails, guidelines for what you can and can't do, what's the most appropriate system to put particular pieces of data on, what's the best way to do automation, right? Are we an Apex shop? Do we avoid Apex? Do we use flows? So, there'll be guardrails around all of that. If you've got your solution that's compliant and you're able to preempt any questions they might have by reassuring them that you've read the rules and you're following them, you've got those stakeholders on your side. You also need to talk really about the choices and the trade-offs, right? So you can say, we did think about doing it this way, but on balance, we've gone for this solution, even though perhaps it's slightly outside of the guardrails. Here's the justification, yeah? And if that's the first conversation you're having with them, you're probably going to get a lot of pushback. But if you think about going through a project where you've met with them multiple times and you've got a good, clean record, you've built their trust, they're going to be a little bit more lenient with you when you need to step outside of the lines. So the kinds of diagrams that would be interesting for them: data model, system landscape, sequence diagram, and then examples of reference architecture that you're following, right? So I didn't make all this up. I got this off of Salesforce, or I got this from examples of other clients we've done it for, providing that evidence to reassure them. Then you might have an audience that's legal and compliance, very friendly group of people. So you might see them pre-sales. So they'll be going through, okay, exactly what's going to be planned here, what are the details that's in the contract. More likely, you're going to meet them in a post-sale surprise where they didn't get the memo that this new system was going to happen, and now they have questions, so you need to be ready. It could be that you're already established and there's a change of situation, so maybe another company's been acquired, maybe they've been acquired. You then need to go and talk to them, mostly about data. Yeah? So they're very interested in data categorization, data retention policy, disposal, data residency. That's one that remains a relevant topic for us in the cloud. Because, yep, Salesforce has got an EU data center or a UK data center, no problem, but that third-party app that we just decided to plug in, that's in US. That's going to be a problem. So having awareness of that allows you then to describe the risks to the stakeholders and make clear what the options are and why you recommended particular choices. So again, data model, system landscape, POAP, plan on a page, or even a data dictionary. So going down and showing them, here's how we've categorized the data, this is what's sensitive, this is what's PII. Having your homework done and demonstrating it to them, again, you're going to build trust, you're going to build confidence. Business. So this is kind of a general catch-all. What do they want? They want their problem solved. It's really that simple. You're going to engage with them a lot, and it could be people of various experiences, seniorities, from various different business units. So you're going to meet them in less formal situations and engage with them. Again, it's a great opportunity to build relationships and trust, to get the inside story on maybe what they wouldn't tell you formally. You can get a better feel for possible problems going ahead. So really very much an opportunity to build relationships with them, and that's a two-way street. If you can give them a better idea of when things are going to happen, what's going to change, and how they could help you, what's the opportunity for them, again, you're going to get them on side. In terms of diagrams that's relevant for this audience, pretty much everything. So everything that went before, but also now we're getting into journeys, processes, and also the product roadmap. So if they're not getting the thing that they want now, if you can tell them when they are going to get it, again, that's going to help them not become noisy, stay on side with you, and accept they're going to wait for the next release for their feature. And hopefully that's not the dreaded phase 2 that never happens. Executives. So where you might meet them, funnily enough, I usually bump into them somewhere. So in a lift, in a corridor, or they drop by a workshop to say hello. They, of course, want their problem solved, but they also might have a bit more of a strategic view, right? So they want to know about innovation. They want to know about what are other people doing, what's happening, what's Salesforce doing. So if you've got a story around that ready to go, if you've got an elevator pitch, right, a little bit like we saw in the demo jam, if you've got an elevator pitch ready, can really help you to make the most of that opportunity, because you're probably not going to get in front of them very often. And in terms of diagrams, if you're in a formal situation, anything around, what's the data, what's the structure, how long is it going to take, and then in addition to the product roadmap, can you give them a horizon view? And we'll take a look at an example of that in a minute. And then finally, what's the operating model? So how is this technology going to fit in with the business as a whole? Maybe there's other systems in the business, pretty likely. How do things work together to get the job of the business done, rather than just being some amazing piece of software that sits as an island on itself? So really, that was a summary of different stakeholders. There's variations of that, but hopefully that's given you a flavor of what's been my experience. And really, it's about putting yourself in their shoes and being informed. So in terms of doing your preparation, doing your homework, whether that is reading through the guidelines that the technical governance of the company requires, right? It might be that you're on the other side, you're on the client side. All of these things, you need to know that they ought to exist. If you're inviting consultants in, if you're inviting other product companies in to come and give you something, set some ground rules for them and make sure that they're followed. If you're the architect or in the architect role, do expect questions, expect to be challenged, don't be offended. And again, it's very much, it's not about showing them how clever you are and what an amazing solution you produced. It's really about what can you do to make them feel comfortable with what's happening. If you do that, then they're going to pay that back to you in the future when you need it. So, top tips. Have your diagrams ready, but don't just have a picture, right? This is how you can personalize the piece of content, the diagram, for the audience. What I always do is introduce the diagram on a slide with a message or a call to action, right? What do you want them to take away from this picture? If you're a manager or if you're an executive and somebody puts a picture up on the screen in front of you, great, what's it telling me? If you put that at the top, it really helps people to tune in to then the next things that you're going to say. And some quotes I had from somebody who mentored me a few years back: always have a page. So always have them ready in your back pocket. I used to, in previous jobs, walk around with printouts in my bag at all times, just in case I bumped into somebody, just in case I was in a meeting, and we could pull that out and take a look at it, even if there wasn't a screen in the meeting room. So always have a page. And remember, you're the architect, your page is the right page. Because if it's not your page, then you're not in control of what's going on. Okay, should we have a look at some examples? How are we doing for time? I can't even remember what time we're supposed to finish. I think we've got 19 minutes. And in the poll, people said it was a dead heat, whether it was 5 minutes of questions or 10 minutes of questions. So we could call it 7.5, but we had a bit of technical difficulties, so we'll see. So, examples of pictures. This is where diagramming for Salesforce Solutions started, which are sort of 4 pictures that meet the majority of our needs. So, the data model and system landscape, the role hierarchy, used less frequently, but really critical in your technical design, and then your environment deployment landscape. That is more and more, well, it's almost fundamental at this point, right? Change sets. The world is too complicated now just to use change sets or move things manually. You've got to have a plan, particularly where you've got systems, multiple systems in the landscape, to manage that test data, right? To make sure that systems are in sync so they'll work properly. So having a plan around that is ever more important. So your system landscape doesn't need to be boring. You can make it interesting. Again, these are not necessarily highly technical diagrams. Those will be needed for technical design and when you're working with people who are going to be implementing. But when we're telling the story, we want it to be relatable. So use icons. Make sure that you put people on the landscape, put the actors on the landscape in terms of who are going to be the users of the system. And you can extend that. If you use paper, This was from about 6 or 7 years ago. This is something that went really well for me, where we just did an initial thing on a flip chart, and then I took it around different groups of stakeholders, and they started to fill in the blanks. And that's a really powerful tool for 2 reasons. First of all, you can get your questions answered. If you've got a blank space on the landscape, you can say, what happens there? How does that work? They can just write it on. It also gives you then something that you can extract and say, look, this wasn't produced just by me. We had engagement from people. So really good signals that people are working as a team. It's not just that some solutions being imposed on them. This is a little bit more detail about the testing and deployment diagram. So shout out to Melissa. Are you here, Melissa? She's not here. Melissa Shepherd's kind of got, from my book, the canonical example of that diagram. Sequences. So we talked about sequences before, and I'll give a shout out to Lawrence Newcomb at Cloud Sundial. Don't know if he's here today either. He's got really the perfect examples around single sign-on flows, and it's a great example of how to use sequence diagrams. So those were the technical diagrams. Let's look at capabilities, which is something that I introduced last year when I dusted this presentation off. So I've got a few more examples to look at now. So the first one is off of the Salesforce Architects website. It's high-level Salesforce capabilities reference architecture. So if you're starting a project and you want to go to a client and say, oh, okay, these are all the bits of Salesforce that you've bought and you can use, this is a great starting point. Have they bought absolutely everything? No. So you can take that diagram and you can adjust it. If they've only got sales and service, take the commerce bit out. But you start to show them what are the high-level capabilities of Salesforce. And I find, particularly for the last few years, talking in capabilities is really, really useful. It's at a high enough level that it's relatable by most people, most audiences. And you don't get tied up in talking about specific processes. You can get down into that later. So for my money, it works really well. This is an asset that's been invaluable to me. So this is produced by some Salesforce Enterprise architects. The link's at the end. But this is basically capability cards that drill down from those top-level capabilities, talk about KPIs, talks about functionality and features. And it's really, really useful because you don't need to make up the lexicon. You can just use that as your template. So this is a real example. And kind of brings in what I was saying about put a message, put a call to action at the top. So this is an example of very high-level capabilities for a professional services organization. They're going to get Sales Cloud, and they're going to get a third-party app to supplement that. So let's color code it. Let's show them what's the core what's the fundamentals of the Salesforce platform in gray. Let's show them what the Sales Cloud stuff is, and then let's show them what's a mixture of Salesforce plus the third-party app. And then down the bottom, data integration, because I already got the impression that integration was going to be critical to success, so I wanted to get it on a page in front of them so I can point to it and say, you need to think about integration because you want that data going into the finance system. We need to make sure it's integrated. So that's the message at the top. Well-integrated business capabilities, blah, blah, blah. Yeah? So you can put that on, and then you're taking control of the agenda. You're then asking people to help you solve the problems that need to be solved. And you can go down into even more detail. So this is a diagram I worked on with a colleague of mine, Jake Peaty. I've sanitized it a little bit, but you can really start to increase the density once you've got people on board. So you can talk about what are the business drivers, and then you can dig into what are the features and the lower level capabilities by group. So you can begin to educate your audience more and more. Maybe don't lead in with that one at the beginning, but as you get people more engaged and you select your audience, they want a little bit more detail. This allows you to do that. And you can do other things like annotate it with, what's a system of engagement, what's a system of record, because not all of these things are going to be coming from Salesforce perhaps. Maybe there's SAP in the environment. So being able to even at a high-level capability, start to talk about where these things are going to be when the system is constructed, is going to give people a much better context of what's going on. How are we doing for time? Ooh, getting time right. Okay. So, activity. So, what's going to happen? When might it happen? POAP, pan on a page. I can't stress enough what the value of being able to show people some kind of idea of time, right? This is where we get into what commitments are we making. But if you can give people a timeline for what's going to happen and when, they find it really reassuring. You can also take it as an opportunity to describe how are you going to work, right? Are we going to have one team? Is it going to be waterfall? Or are we going to run with agile squads? So you can use this to say, this is going to happen, and we're going to have these different groups of people working on stuff. We're going to have a technical go live, and then we're going to have a production rollout after that. Don't forget the hypercare. I always find that very reassuring. And then things that are a little bit more fluffy, right? So show people how you're working together. If you run a workshop, you're going to capture that information. And I found this great app was recommended to me by a CX last year. Post-it, have an app. You can scan it. It's great. So just get that off your relevant app store. But you can also use that in your storytelling. You can say, hey, we met with you last week. Look at all the great stuff everybody produced. Everybody's really engaged. Everybody's on board. We're all working on this together. Yeah, and you can even, there we go. You can even do some photos. So this has been my favorite toy for the last 18 months. Just throw them into PowerPoint and then turn them into photos. But it shows how we're all working together. We're all heading in the same direction. And so if you've got a call to action of, please, can you support me in solving this hard problem, probably an organizational problem rather than a technical one, you've got some evidence as to, the team themselves are on board. So, getting a bit more strategic, vision. So this is when things are a little bit more uncertain. So a tool that I use here, and I work with Jake on this one, is planning horizons, right? So you can read online about this, like McKinsey horizon theory and all that sort of stuff. But really what you're saying is, at a certain point in time, we'll have this degree of maturity in the systems, this degree of capability, and then we can think about going to the next horizon, yeah? So rather than saying, it's going to be in 3 months' time, you say, well, actually the dependency is, once we've got good quality data in Sales Cloud, then we'll be in a position to do better forecasting. Then we'll be in a better position to do automation around statements of work or something like that, right? So building those dependencies in, and as well giving people a view further out as to why should they suffer through some of the trials and tribulations that are inevitable in projects. Where are we trying to get to? What's the dream? So horizons are very good for that. And then finally, the operating model. So how does this work as a whole within the business? And this is where it's not just about delivery. So at the top here, we're talking about, well, what's the governance? What's the direction setting with the steering board? But look at some of the things that are in here, right? They're not things that if you're in a delivery role, as an implementer, you think about day to day, but really you should, and particularly with an architect mindset, you should. You should be thinking about innovation. You should be thinking about projects that have gone well that you can use to say, look, we were able to do this with Salesforce. Can we now go and do something more ambitious? We've got evidence that we can do it. Make things that are repeatable. So don't reinvent the wheel every time. We did this project like this last year. We're going to do something similar in a different area of the business. And then down the bottom, it's the basic hygiene. So things around governance, technical design authority, standards, best practice, and as well, onboarding and enablement. So teams change over time. Faces change over time. You need to have a repeatable process to keep people engaged in what are the best practices, what are the guardrails. So this is more enterprise architecture level, but as Salesforce project sizes continue to grow, this is more and more relevant. So when you come out of a presentation or a meeting or a video call, think about how was the atmosphere. Did you get it right? What I do is I try to assess, did I have the right message for the right audience? Did I actually have a message that worked very well everywhere else, but then when I brought it to this particular audience, it didn't work? Why was that? What am I missing? It could be a really good barometer for telling you if you're in danger of missing something that's going to trip you up later. So, are people engaging? Are they collaborating? Are they questioning? Right? Are they challenging? Challenging is not a bad thing. It's a good sign that they care and they've got an opinion. But certainly, taking people's feedback on how to correct, how to enhance is great. And if they get emotional, if they get passionate about it, again, it's not a bad thing. We'll come on to this in a minute, but depending on your personality type and their personality type, people express themselves in different ways. And so, as I said earlier on, you need to be ready to be questioned, you need to be ready to be challenged, and take that in a positive mindset, which is not always easy, in order to keep things moving forward. So, bringing the story to life, what more can you do? So we've done diagrams, I've done diagrams for the last few years. Let's get a bit more fluffy. So if we go beyond the diagrams, thinking about your impact as an architect, it's not just about drawing the picture and says, look guys, this is the right answer. What can you do to your team to build them up? As much as they're helping you, what can you do to help them? And that's true as well with other architects that you might work with or other architects within the community, if you're a member of a user group or one of the many sort of online channels that you can. How could you take the opinions and the feedback of other people in order to enhance your engagement as an architect? Practice in presenting to leadership. Their objectives, their goals are not always the same as somebody who's technical. The more you do it, the more you get to understand and listen to them and tune in. They don't always tell you directly what they want, right? So it's like any relationship. Your other half doesn't necessarily tell you what they want. You have to tune in and infer sometimes. And the last thing is, as you learn, as you grow, publish that content. Be known for something. If you do that, you'll find that people will then come to you as somebody who is knowledgeable, somebody who's perceived as an expert in this area, and you'll grow that engagement. A couple of things that have helped me through the time, whether you're a believer or not, I am. Personality tests like Myers-Briggs. I'm an ENFP, which is really challenging in a technical world. But knowing some things about yourself and recognizing traits in other people can be really, really useful. So whether it's Myers-Briggs, whether it's StrengthsFinder, these have been really, really useful to me. I didn't set out to do these things. I kind of came to them along the way, but I was really able to take a lot of value from those things. So I think with about 5 minutes remaining, I'll say thank you, and do you have any questions? Or take a picture of the QR code, and the generated image there is I asked it to generate me a Salesforce thank you. So it's not bad, eh? It's good. Okay, that's it from me. That's all you get. Thank you very much. Has anybody got any questions? Everybody's shy first thing. Oh, we've got hands going up now. The lady in the white shirt. Yeah. So the question was, how can you prepare your elevator pitch for somebody? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So this preparing an elevator pitch forces you to distill down who you are, what you're doing, and what you're going to achieve. And if you can do that in 60 seconds and practice it, that could be really, really useful. There's no guarantee that you might ever need to use it, but even if you don't, it's helped refine your thinking. I think we've got time for one more. The lady in the blue shirt.
Diagramming, apart from like Post-its, PowerPoint and stuff like that? Do you have any preference in tool to use?
I always love this question. What's my preferred tool for diagrams? Pencil and paper. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why, because if you ever sat in front of a screen and just procrastinated and you want it to be perfect, so I learned a long time ago, your first sketch on a piece of paper is usually a really good basis to start with. And then what do you extract it into? I produce a lot of PowerPoint these days. I'm in PowerPoint more than I'm in Salesforce by 100 times, I would think. But whether it's one of the online tools, whether it's Visio, it doesn't really matter. What you want is you want to have your library of pictures, and then you're going to need Google Slides or PowerPoint because you're going to want to bring a message, and that message is going to be different, but you can always paste in the same picture. Yeah. Okay, I think we're done. So thank you again. Have a great day. Thank you very much.